Running a travel business can be overwhelming, but imagine if there was a single tool that helped you look professional, stay organized, was easy to use, and affordable. That's just what Travify does. Travify gives you the essential tools you need to look like a travel biz pro. Travify is the most trusted system used by over 30,000 travel brands worldwide. So get started with a system that helps you get back to the joy of planning travel and run your travel business like a pro with Travify.
Finding the perfect resort for your clients can be frustrating and take hours of research. TA Toolkit solves that problem for you. We have over 700 items your clients request, plus you can search multiple destinations at once. You'll have a list of resorts that match your clients' needs in less than 10 minutes. Sign up today with the promo code WAVEPREP2024 for a 14-day free trial. TA Toolkit, it's about time.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's day 2, Operations Day of Prep for Wave Week. I'm your host, Rita M. Perez. If you're new around here, you might recognize me from the Strategic Travel Entrepreneur podcast. This is the 4th year of Prep for Wave Week. And I think, Stephanie, you are one of the original speakers from the original Prep for Wave Week. So welcome back.
Yes. Can't believe it's been this long already, right?
I know. I was like 4 years. So, if you don't know Stephanie, she is a big finance educator. Not only is she an educator, she has her CPA, so she knows a little something about finances for your business. We've done a lot of collaborations in the past, so I'm going to make sure that they're linked up in the bottom. But I don't think we ever talked about this topic before, which is really the systems and processes you need in place for your finances. So first off, like when we first mentioned that, like what comes to your mind when you think of systems and processes to manage finances for business?
Oh, yeah, good one. Well, you have to have one in place. Like there's step number 1. You need one. Because this is kind of something that I just started talking about the last several months. I mean, I've always been talking about it, but it's one of those things where you listen to what other travel advisors are saying, like the comments they're making, and they're complaining, maybe not directly, but like, I can't pay myself. Okay. You can't complain about not being able to pay yourself if you're not willing to dive into your numbers. There's like just point number 1, right? That is foundations. We need some way to track not just track. So, and I'm sure we'll get into this later on. So tracking, yes, you need to, but it doesn't stop there. You have to be able to manage and use that information to grow and become more profitable over time and really meet, your life goals, not just track numbers all day.
Yeah, I think that this is a running theme of Prep for Wave Week that people will find through some of the other presentations. Because spoiler alert, like everything gets recorded out of order. So by the time that we're recording this one, I'm like, I already know what some of the other presentations are about. And it's just like a common theme. Like I feel like if we could maybe create a tagline for Prep for Wave Week, it would be turn your travel agency into a business and get away from the hobby, because everybody or a lot of people that are speaking are coming from that viewpoint. I think there's a lot of people who are travel advisors who are very frustrated that they've been given XYZ information or advice and it's not proving the results that they want in their business, whether that is to make part-time income, whether that's to quit their jobs and go full-time, whether that's in order to make an income to be able to do endless travels, whatever it is. But I feel like sometimes the missing part is sometimes like these easy bits where it's systems and we're talking about finances and it can seem like very overwhelming, but it can be pretty simple. Because I remember talking to somebody last week who mentioned we can't make a large investment in this thing, but we can make a smaller investment because our cash flow isn't there. And I was like, hello. But I don't think, especially when we're starting out or if we haven't figured things out in business, we don't understand what that means. Like what exactly is cash flow? And I know we've talked about that before. But when people are trying to forecast, what are some of the tools or the systems or even like the foundational elements that need to be in place? Because I heard this quite often over the summer. I had a really busy winter spring. It's not going to pick up again until festive season. So now I have this gap in income. What do they need to be doing like during this time to cover that gap in income?
Actually, they need to be doing it before there's a gap in the income.
Uh-huh.
Like that's really the key. And
Uh-huh.
that's one of the systems, meaning, so, you have your fruitful season, money comes in. Like, what are you doing with it? Are you setting some aside
Mhm.
so that now, when you're in a month or a couple of months where commissions are low, or maybe not even at all, none at all?
Mhm.
I mean, some people book groups and maybe their groups travel like 4 times a year, right? And then the other months they really don't have much else going on. Do you have money set aside in, you can call it whatever you want, emergency fund, slush fund, like whatever, resonates with you, but it's
Mhm.
almost like, I wish I had one on my desk. I usually do. An envelope, the envelope systems, like, are
Yeah.
you taking part of your money as soon as it comes in and putting it in buckets?
Uh-huh.
So this is earmarked for this, and this much is earmarked for this. And that way it's kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Mhm.
Because what typically happens, when it's all in one bank account or all in one place, I'm guilty of this. I see it, I'm like, "Ooh, I can go spend that," right?
Right.
Forgetting of the things that are to come in the future.
Mhm.
And we really, to take your travel business up a notch or to the next level, it's really about not just tracking the money in, money out, but managing it as soon as it comes in so
Mhm.
that it is available for when you need it in the future. And honestly, like, we can consider that part of operations, but it also borderlines expansion.
Mhm.
That's how you're going to get to that expanded profitability.
Yeah, because you mentioned bank accounts, and I feel like bank accounts is probably the best place where everybody should start when you're really trying to track finances. And so I know nobody on here is like your client per se, so it's not like you're giving advice. But when we're thinking about business bank accounts, what are some of the things? Because it just doesn't, I don't feel it needs to be one bank account. Like you have your checking account, there should be like savings account. I'm thinking about tax accounts. So in the finance realm, what are some accounts that people should have set up so they don't think like, oh my gosh, there's like $1,000, $5,000 in my account? But no, some of that money is allocated to different things.
Correct. So first, you really need to figure out, like, what do you want to allocate? And
Uh-huh.
if you're a profitable business, especially, we're in the US, so I'm sure every other country pays taxes on profit. What that looks like, I don't know specifically, but in the US, it's fairly easy to calculate what that might look like. Just taking a percentage off the top, right,
Mhm.
to set aside for taxes.
Right.
And some people do this, some people don't. And they potentially, somebody listening has been caught off guard at the end of the year and they get a call from their tax person saying, "Hey, you owe the IRS $10,000." And you're like, "Where am I going to get that from?"
Yeah.
Because I already spent it. So just having to me, that's a really important one,
Mhm.
is taxes. But many people may be familiar with Profit First. That's one method of having those bank accounts. I don't think that it's the end all be all.
Mhm.
Yes, it's great, but it doesn't work for every business or every mindset in business. Some people just think about things differently. So, you can mimic that however you want, but you have your money that comes in, and what are you doing with it? Well, you have expenses to pay for. So
Mhm.
we at least need to have a certain amount set aside for whatever our average monthly expenses are so that we're able to cover them, right?
Mhm.
And then taxes, of course, your own profit and pay. Like you want to get paid.
Right.
So if you already set the money aside and it's not available to spend, then maybe it'll stay there and you can still pay yourself consistently
Mhm.
or create that emergency fund. So I have, a certain number of accounts that I use, but I'll equate it on the personal side because people may resonate with that a little bit more.
Mhm.
Most people probably have one checking account, but they might have multiple savings accounts.
Mm.
And I remember growing up, my parents had a Christmas club account at their credit union and a
Ooh.
vacation club account. And literally, when their paycheck came in, before it ever went into their bank account, a certain amount would come out of their paycheck and go in those two every
Okay.
single, week or every 2 weeks so that the money was there.
Uh-huh.
And we were guaranteed to be able to take a vacation and guaranteed like, oh, we have money to go buy gifts at Christmas
I love
versus
that.
trying to figure out like, oh, wait a minute. We want to, go do something. Now we
Mhm.
got to put it on a credit card,
Yeah, because
which
oh, go ahead.
no, well, I mean, years ago, when I was growing up, credit cards weren't really the thing.
Mhm.
Now, I think it's completely flipped all the digital payment methods, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
very easy to get out of control
Very
very
tricksy.
quickly. It
Yep.
gets out of hand fast.
Yeah, very tricksy. Because I know there's a lot of travel advisors who use credit cards for expenses so that they can accumulate like all those miles and
Yes.
points and all the business perks, but making sure that you pay that off when you're supposed to pay it off and not delay in that. Another account that I was thinking about is some sort of escrow account, which I guess could be a savings account and you just leave money in there as an escrow account, where if like you're holding client funds, because I know this is something that got people into some hot water, especially during the pandemic, where they were spending funds that weren't supposed to be spendable just yet. And when refunds were happening, they were like, I don't know. I already used that money. So to kind of
Exactly.
get
And
you out of hot water.
yeah, and that to me is more for independent travel advisors or
Okay.
those like um collecting money directly from clients, but the clients haven't traveled yet, and they are still need to pay the supplier the net or whatever. But it could be a good practice across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're hosted and your host pays you the commission in your monthly check as soon as they receive it, but the client hasn't traveled yet. So maybe that's part of your practice to set that aside immediately in that quasi escrow account so that
Mm-hmm.
you're not spending it until hey, these people have traveled. It's safe for me to move the money into my income.
Right. And that you make a great point there because everybody's business model is going to be different. So from a high level perspective, because we don't have time to cover everything, but what would you say are the main differences in terms of finances between hosted, independent, and franchise?
Yeah, so it's hard for me to say, so I'm just kind of using my limited education on franchises because I'm not a franchisee,
Hmm.
but I do know that somebody like Cruise Planners probably has a separate system that helps their franchisees manage their money a little bit differently. I just saw an email, I think it came yesterday from KHM saying that they had like a bookkeeping solution, and I'm like, is it really a bookkeeping solution or is it a
Yeah.
commission management solution, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't, I'd have to dig into that more to see. So there's tools already out there that are in play, and there's pros and cons to all of these.
Hmm.
But hosted, traditionally, you're going to have to report your sales to whatever system your host dictates so
Hmm.
that they know that's your booking and you get paid, but that may not meet all the requirements for what you want to capture
Hmm.
as well. So there's kind of like this dueling, like, what do I do? I have to use
Yeah.
theirs, but then I also want my own.
Right.
Whereas independent, like you're just using whatever system you pick. And there's
Right.
lots of CRMs out there. Some of them are more robust than others. We've seen a lot of strides,
Oh yeah.
especially the last several years, making things more robust, more integratable, I should
Hmm.
say. Let me, if that's a word,
Hmm.
to integrate across the board. So now you're not having this duplicate entry. So I think whatever system you use, of course, if there's a mandated one to be able to get paid, then of course you're going to want to use that.
Hmm.
But do you need something else to enhance it? It really depends on what your goals are and, maybe the back end bookkeeping system as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really, I'm like, this is a really great segue into talking about specific tools because we know that there's spreadsheets and QuickBooks. And then we also know that there is Xeon, Trip Suite, and Turn is becoming like pretty robust in their CRM commission tracking right now. So I guess like what is needed when? And do you need something like a QuickBooks and a Xeon? Or do you need a spreadsheet and Turn? Like what is needed at what point?
It depends. It really does. So when you're looking at something like Xeon, right?
Uh-huh.
That one is really robust. And I think that they're coming up with an integration with QuickBooks Online. I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure I saw that was in the pipeline. So I haven't checked in recently just to see.
Okay.
Trip Suite is already, that's like their whole premise. They integrate with QuickBooks Online.
Okay.
But they're for the larger agencies and the larger hosts. So they don't support individual travel advisors.
Hmm.
So I'm hoping that like somebody like Turn, maybe they're listening and we can connect,
Uh-huh.
would want to come up with an integration as well for the smaller, individual travel advisor that would be an affordable. That's really what we're looking for here, right? And still
Right.
fit the need, but also be affordable because I'm just of the premise if you're using a QuickBooks Online, yes, you can create every single booking or recreate it in QuickBooks, but then I'm like, why?
Hmm.
When you already have it in a CRM, you just need to learn how to basically cross check between the two to say,
Right.
hey, this is where I'm logging every single sale I have. Here's where I'm capturing that I've been paid that commission. Now, that commission I've been paid, when is it deposited to my bank account, which is when QuickBooks would pick it up. That's just for the
Okay.
individual advisor, right? We don't need to
Yeah.
overcomplicate this.
Yeah, because I think maybe that's an even better question is not necessarily what tool people should be using, but what should they be looking for in tools? Because I know the benefit of having a QuickBooks is that it will track everything, meaning like especially when it comes to tax time, it knows what you spent on marketing, it knows what your household expenses were and all those things. Whereas a commission tracker and I guess an overall revenue tracker can help you see like what commission is coming when, what your sales have been, helps you like track things like where a majority of your sales are coming from on an individual level, which clients are spending the most money on what products. So when people are kind of like, okay, I know I need to track this, what pieces, what components are like the most important at like the base level of tracking your finances?
Yeah. So when it comes to, I mean, basically, because the audience here is probably independent, like individual travel
Right.
advisors or small teams. Maybe there's
Mhm.
an individual with some ICs.
Right.
So really, when it comes to the financial piece, not sales, like not commission owed, we're tracking when the money comes in to when it goes out.
Mhm.
And it's really that basic, but you can accomplish that with a spreadsheet. Now, most people aren't
Okay.
knowledgeable with spreadsheets and trying to create the formulas and making sure you don't miss anything.
Uh-huh.
And, all those cross checks are not really there unless you know what you're looking for specifically and how to spot those. So spreadsheets can be a little misleading, right? And time consuming.
Right.
So that's when you would potentially cross over into a bookkeeping software, which connects directly to your bank account, directly to your credit card or credit cards, or, multiple bank accounts that are the ones that are solely used for business. So I think this might be a little like sidestep for a minute, but as a best practice, as a business owner, stop mixing the business and personal in the same accounts. Like, you're just killing yourself.
Yeah.
You're making it so complex, prone to missing items. Like, just separate once and for all.
Yes. I completely agree.
Even if it's a separate personal account,
Yes.
I think the argument I've gotten in the past, well, it's really expensive for me to create an LLC in my state. Fine, I get that, because there are some states that have a hefty price tag to have an LLC and pay, the annual registration or whatever it is. So, okay, you hold off until like, this is a go, you're really profitable, and you can justify paying that every single year. Still open a separate bank account that's just for travel, and a separate credit card that's just for your travel expenses.
Yeah.
Help yourself out.
I completely agree with that, because that also like gives you clarity where things come from. I think like that was like one of the best things that I did, because I had things in one account for so long that now I can kind of see, okay, like, where's this money coming out from? Where's this coming in from? Speaking of spreadsheets, and I don't want to get into formulas because that is very complicated, but what about automations? Like, and I think of things like Zapier, which is like one of those connector tools. So when you're saying that you might not necessarily need to have a QuickBooks online, or maybe QuickBooks isn't your style, but having a spreadsheet is your style, is there a way to like have numbers come in from either invoices or your bank account automatically input on your spreadsheets? Is that even a thing?
It's a little complex to do
Okay,
it.
yeah.
And I think the average, like, just business owner in general, if they haven't come from a corporate background where they used like Microsoft Office or the Google suite of products, would really struggle trying to set all that up. Right. We do have, I've met several in our industry, and they can make it happen, but others will be like, this is too complicated.
Yeah.
And so to semi-automate a spreadsheet, which is something that I've helped travel advisors do in the past, like, download your transactions as a CSV file, like paste them in there, but then you still have to categorize them and make sure you didn't miss anything. And, it's lacking the checks and balances piece of it. And then of course you need to have like formulas to add all those up over time, which can get a little complicated too.
Yeah, that's where I say like spreadsheet, I feel as if you're not able to invest in any software, then obviously like a spreadsheet is better than not having anything. And then I think about like the next generation, like the next level would be having some sort of tech tool. So we've touched a little bit on tools. Now, what about the processes? Because I feel like the process that we all talk about is like you have to review your numbers. But what exactly does that mean? What does that translate to the average person, aside from you can see like, oh, that money went out. And oh, like I think about high school accounting class where I was like writing down on the ledger, this money went in and this money went out.
But that's essentially what you're doing with, a spreadsheet or a bookkeeping software, right? So you're still doing those things, because, not gonna lie, that's how I started. It was all the ledger pads. You had the 2-column, the 4-column, this massive one. And literally that was the client's books. When I first started, like, it was all manual. Well, that took a lot of time.
Yeah.
Now we have the ability to make it very efficient these days. So to me, it's all about having the right mindset in place. So the biggest thing literally Oh my gosh. Consistency, right? It's just not an annual thing anymore.
Yeah.
And so many business owners of the mindset, oh, I need to get my numbers together so I can file taxes. Like, is that really the only reason you want to do it? Because you have to, like somebody's twisting your arm, they'll eventually come after you if you're not filing your taxes,
Right.
right? But we can get so much more out of this
Hmm.
by making it a monthly habit. And some businesses may need to be more than monthly, depending on the volume.
Hmm.
They may want to do their catch up every week, and some may be in there a couple times a week, just so they don't have this large, you know, line of entries, transactions, whatever, staring them in the face at the end of every month.
Hmm.
So putting that type of process in place where, like, here's what I'm going to do every day. Here, and if you fall in that category, not everybody will be there. Here's, the steps that I'm going to take every week. Here's the things I need to do every month. And the goal being that you do have summarized format of your numbers, right? We're not looking at going in the weeds, looking at line item by line item. We want to see it summarized.
Right.
So how much did I spend on marketing? How much am I spending on software? What did that fam trip really cost me? Like, all of those things you can see when it's summarized and on a report versus a statement that comes from your bank or your credit card. And you're like, well, it's everything.
Right. I feel like that's important to also see, especially like you mentioned fam trips. So if the fam trip costs you $5,000, what is your plan to recoup the expenses from that fam trip as well? I don't think we typically talk about that return on investment. I think like we're so excited just to be able to go out and experience something new, but it's like you spent money to also make that money back.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really, like, again, where it would cross over into the expansion side of it. You're spending this money in your business, but what is it getting you?
Hmm.
Because just me being a numbers person, it's very easy for me to say every dollar that you spend in your business is a dollar that you do not have to put in your own pocket, right? It's gone.
Yeah.
So it needs to be doing something for you if you're going to choose to make that expense or to invest in that fan trip. And wouldn't you want to have a return? Like, not just break even.
Right.
Like, you want
Um,
to make something back over, the long term.
yeah, thinking about your former life when you were doing like corporate finances, what would you say is the difference in how a corporation, a CEO, C-suite level executive might think about finances or look at finances versus how a small business owner might look at their business finances?
Yeah, to me, it's night and day.
Oh, okay. Ooh.
I mean, and there's some similarities, but there's also some differences, right? So it's depending on the level of person in the corporation. If you're talking about the CFO and the CEO, they're
Mhm.
looking at very high level summarized data, right?
Okay.
And they're comparing it to a plan or a budget that was already created for the year.
Okay.
And that's really the department that I work on, budgeting and finance.
Uh-huh.
So they created their plans, and these came from the VPs of those departments with their project managers and, whoever worked in there, basically what jobs they were going to need to do for the
Hmm.
year. So they came up with their plan. Well, every month they had to sit down and review with the VP, like, why they were over or under. It's like, what changed? And then if it's over, what are you going to adjust to get back on track?
Right.
And I feel like for small business owners in general, and then of course travel advisors, there may not be a plan. And it's just, oh, I have this money sitting in my bank account. The money
Hmm.
came in, I'm going to spend it. Or kind of like the other side of the coin, I just made an amazing booking and they're going to travel 9 months from now. This commission's coming. I'm going to spend it today.
Right.
Where
Oh.
the corporations are like, wait a minute, we only have so much money, or we have to go borrow more.
Right.
And travel advisors do that too. They're just borrowing it on a credit card or out of their personal savings.
I love that you mentioned that because before I went full-time entrepreneur, I worked in the theme parks and my last role was as a senior labor analyst. And so every year around like between October through maybe it would run like January, February, depending on how delayed things got, was budget season for us, where not me as a labor analyst would have to justify expenses, but the areas. So, like, if you're thinking about a theme park, attractions, health services, the engineering side of things, all of that has to be accounted for because there's a budget. We are going to have 5 people, and this is what their hourly rate is going to be. So, it's a little bit different if you don't have like a big team and all that. But I mentioned that because that's not something that's also top of mind when we talk about finances or just talk about running a business in travel, is that budgetary review or the budgetary planning that happens. This is something that we kind of talk about and touch on a little bit, but not like too in depth in Plan Your Year session. But like, are there any pointers that you would have for like small business owners, especially on the travel end, about like why and like what they need to be looking for in a budgetary review?
Yeah. So first they need to create kind of a budget, which is really a plan. It's an expense
Mhm.
plan.
Yeah.
A lot of people will create their sales plan, a marketing plan, like those kind of things. Well, let's do the same thing with our expenses so
Mhm.
you can get some control and just see what you're expecting to happen. So we already know, unless you're brand new, you probably don't. But if you've been in operation for a while, then you know what you're spending your money on already. Like, what are the things you pay for every single month? Like, what are the things you have to have? You know, what are the software that you're using in your business, and what does that cost you?
Mhm.
Like, outline those, because that's part of your budget. If you're going to continue to use those, then we need to say, here it is. And what kind of marketing or advertising do you want to do or continue or try in the coming year? And just set a little bit of money aside based on like what's worked in the past, and maybe a little bit of play money to try ads or something
Right.
different, because
I
you're
love
going to do it
that.
anyway.
I love that. The idea of having like play money set aside for whatever experiments you want to run.
Yeah, and isn't that what business is? It's an experiment. We're experimenting on what's going to work for not just selling and sales, but
Right.
also to make us more efficient, to give us more of our time back, and to be able to pay ourselves more. And that's where the profitability piece is.
Mhm.
So I heard this. Oh my God, this is so funny. So we're talking about budget, and we also talked about cash flow like
Mhm.
earlier. And I heard this from another financial person on a podcast. And they talked about when when you don't know like what you're spending your money on, or what you think you should be spending your money on, or what your cash flow is going to be. It's like driving a car without a windshield, like, and not even a hole, like it's black. So you're just trying not to hit something, and you're only using your rear view and your side mirrors to do it. And like, how is that even possible? You don't know where you're going.
That is very scary to think about.
Right. But isn't that true? Because if you're making decisions just based on what you see currently sitting in your bank account,
Right.
like how is that helping you? Unless you're not spending any of it. I mean, then maybe, but yeah. So the visuals help, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I would never drive a car where I couldn't see out the windshield.
Yeah, I'm visualizing that and then being like, can I look outside? But even that
Right?
that would be
Exactly.
hard.
But that's kind of how running a business is when you're always stuck in the past. And to me, one of the major things that I feel like is missing, especially amongst travel advisors, we're just tracking the past.
Mhm.
Like, we need to look to the future and
Yes.
figure out, and we have the tools available. A lot of people
Mhm.
already have the information. They just don't know quite how to do it.
Mhm. I
So
was
it would be
gonna say,
helpful.
That is also a good segue because we have run out and you always do, well, not always, but you frequently do. You've brought back on Finance Fridays in your Facebook group. So can you tell us just a little bit of the support? Because I know like the iceberg is like this big and we
Yeah.
hit like this much here.
Right. There's always a lot of stuff, right? So yes. So they were originally Finance Friday, it's still Finance Friday, but I call them
Uh-huh.
profit power-ups. And so almost, I don't want to commit to every single Friday in my
Right.
group just because sometimes I have other things to do and I'm not
Uh-huh.
in town or whatever. But they happen in the First Class Profit Lounge on Fridays, 11 a.m. Central. They're free. Try to keep them to 30-minute-ish. Just
Mhm.
quick tip, quick topic that we talk about. Also have a financial checklist. So we talked about process, right?
Right.
Like what are the things you do as part of your process or your workflow? Well, that checklist will absolutely give you an idea of here are the things that you can be doing each week versus each month versus every quarter, and maybe just that once a year stuff that you don't have to touch every single month. And then of course, various workshops, mentorship, and even those who want to venture into QuickBooks Online. Lots of resources to help you get that up and running and actually learn how to maintain it yourself.
Yeah, and of course, I'm linking all those down below, as well as some of the other interviews and conversations Stephanie and I have had. I really love this conversation, kind of like thinking about finances more tactical. So thank you, Stephanie, for being here and sharing with us. And then also a huge thank you to our partners for Prep for Wave Week, our presenting partners, Travify and TA Toolkit, and then our premier partners, Fine Travel, Inflow Design Co., and Lucia. Thank you so much, everybody. And today, I'm trying to think, Operations Day. Actually, TA Toolkit is co-hosting our study hall session at 3 p.m. Eastern. So if you don't have your study hall pass, there's also going to be a link below if you'd like to join us on that and learn a little bit more. But thanks again, Stephanie. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be back.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.